Okay, I'm gonna go out and say it right here. Lanolin's a really interesting character to me. I personally found her to be a really great addition to IDW, but a lot of people seem to really dislike her. So to see if the hate is warranted, I've decided that I'm gonna go through all of Lanolin's story just up to date inside of IDW because I feel like it's kind of wrapped up pretty well at the moment. And I'm also gonna give a little bit of my own theories in regards to what kind of stemmed these negative opinions towards her. So Lanolin would make her debut as an unnamed character in the second issue of IDW Sonic, and I actually think it's really interesting to see that she started as a nobody who just existed to warn Amy and Sonic about an Eggman attack. Now from here, Lano would next be seen helping out inside of Restoration HQ along with Amy, and for the most part, she would be seen in the background working on admin stuff or logistics. However, this would change during the Metal Virus, where she would take up an active role in helping others during the Zombot crisis. Or at least she would in the background. Again, we wouldn't really hear anything from her, but it can be assumed that she was pretty busy and that she did a pretty good job because she showed up often enough that she ended up having appearances pretty late into the crisis. We'd even see some leadership start with her as she started to organize refugees on Angel Island. I really like this one panel also where like infected Sonic is sitting over top of her and you can tell she is not loving this at all. After this, Lano would then take a trip to White Park Zone. Not totally sure why she's here, but we would see her chilling in the background with a pretty cool looking Lynx. Finally though, Lanolin would get the chance to speak 35 issues since her first line. Sonic and Tails would be introducing Belle to the new Restoration after the Metal Virus incident, and while here, Jewel would take Belle to Lanolin, who we would learn is actually working for Jewel, and she takes her job really seriously. She only refers to Jewel as Director or Director Jewel. Lanolin would continue to show her serious side as she shows Belle around and would introduce her to the Chief Mechanic, who she would only refer to as Sir. Now, from here, Lano would kind of find her space. Lano, Jewel, Whisper, and Tangle would all be together at one point in Restoration HQ, and before they could get into much here, Sonic would then arrive. Lano would explain that she actually wants to start a rapid response team to further help protect people, and this group would be comprised of Lanolin, Tangle, and Whisper. She then asked Sonic for some help getting into Eggman's base. Sonic would be totally down for this, and when asked for what their team name is going to be, Tangle would excitedly jump in with the name Diamond Cutters, which Lano is completely fine with, but this would cause a lot of ire to Whisper due to her history as a former Diamond Cutter. Now, quick little recap if you didn't know, but the Diamond Cutters were a group of freedom fighters that Whisper was a part of prior to the events of the IDW comic. They fought against Eggman, and one of their members, Mimic, would end up turning on them and he would have all of them killed. Well, all of them except for Whisper, of course. Shameless plug, but I have a Tangle and Whisper video which covers the entirety of the Diamond Cutters history. But with that set up, Lanolin would be in charge of a new freedom fighter group, and it's around this point where I saw a lot of readers in the community compare her to Sally Acorn from the Archie Sonic comics. And truth be told, if you are one of those people, I just want to say that you're setting yourself up here to be unhappy, as these characters, and quite frankly these comics, are very different from one another. And you're not gonna find Archie inside of IDW. That's just kind of simply a fact that you have to accept. And I think that's a really big part as to why people dislike Lano, because she's nothing like Sally, but she's also not meant to be Sally. Anyway, with that aside, Sonic was on board, and Lano would explain that she's been looking forward to working alongside Sonic for a long time. This would cause a bit of confusion with Sonic as he doesn't actually remember Lanolin at all, and it's here where Lanolin would reveal that she's been around since the start, showing up in the background, and that after watching Sonic save her hometown, she then volunteered to join the restoration team, which eventually led to her working under Jewel. Full of determination, she would be off to work with her hero, and I'm sure nothing bad could come out of meeting your hero. The gang would then go assault the Eggperial City, and while here, Lano would be very skeptical about how lax Eggman seems to be about the defenses here, and was quite unhappy in seeing Sonic and Tangle just rush in with some pretty reckless behavior. She'd make a really good point here though, that eventually their luck isn't going to be on their side, and this is going to get them in trouble. After getting jumped by some badniks, Lano would jump in and protect Tangle with a pretty neat attack. She'd use a combination of her wisp and the oversized bell on her chest, which would create a supersonic noise. Finally, with the action done, Sonic would get a bit of beratement from Lanolin as she'd get mad at him and Tangle for just forgetting about her and Whisper and rushing into this fight. Sonic would explain that he doesn't really do slow entrances, and Whisper would have some relationship issues with Tangle due to the result of their team name. While Sonic would want to continue rushing in, Lano would encourage him to hold back as Whisper sent out a wisp to go investigate the area. Through this, Lanolin would then learn that the Eggperial City is weirdly growing despite a lack of any construction equipment. Sonic would then combine himself with a wisp and take a look around, and while doing that, he would find that even formerly destroyed areas were now repaired in the city, so not only is it growing, but it's also repairing itself without any construction infrastructure. Lanolin would be really disappointed to see how laissez-faire Sonic is towards all of this information, and during this time in a really funny scene, Tangle would beg Whisper to let her use one of the Wisp's power, but Whisper would not let her. Lano would deduce that this city is somehow living, and so it needs some kind of fuel, and Sonic would remember that there's an underground network of tunnels under here. So with that, the group is off. Though, much to Sonic and Tangle's disappointment, Lanolin makes sure that they work cautiously while going underground. I really love how bored Sonic is in this action panel as everyone gets ready to go. Underground, they would find a few badniks and an incredibly deep and dark tunnel. Lanolin would head down, and using her bell ability, she would light up the cavern, but would find that there actually isn't much of anything down here aside from an insane amount of strip mining. Lano would want to return to Restoration HQ to formulate a plan, but Sonic would be far more interested in attacking the main tower of the Imperial City. Lano would be really against this idea as it's incredibly dangerous to do so, and to that, Whisper would offer to stay here alone and scout around the area while they head back and make a plan. But Tangle would get quite upset at this idea and would say that Whisper really shouldn't be doing so much solo work as she's part of a team here, much to the shock of Whisper. But before any of this could continue, a strange portal would open, which Sonic recognizes as a portal to the Cyber Realm, and this would have the group starting to flee from it. Now, the Cyber Realm, honestly, kind of weird, but they're basically ghosts. That's the best way to sum it up. They're invisible to everyone else. They're just intangible. Anyways, as the group fled away, eventually a badnik would hit Sonic in the hand, and it would cause him to drop the group into the portal. Now, these three ladies would find themselves trapped inside of this cyber realm where they couldn't interact with anything around them and they couldn't be seen, and this would cause Whisper to finally go out and scout out the area. And Tangle would get really peeved off at the situation while Tangle collapsed on the ground and just shut down. Tangle would eventually try to get Lanolin up to formulate a plan, but Lanolin would tell her that she is not the boss of the group. Tangle would remind her that actually, yes, you are the one who created this group and you're the one who planned out this mission, so you're basically the leader here. But depression would continue to tug at Lano as she would explain that she really doesn't feel like she's actually cut out for this work. She would explain that she was really terrified when her hometown was attacked and she just wanted to make sure that no one would ever feel that fear by joining Restoration HQ. Due to this, she decided that she would try to make a change, but now that she's in this position where she can make a change, she feels as though everything is just way too overwhelming and everything that she has done has failed. It's all on her and it's really tough. Tangle would let her know, though, that these failures don't fall uniquely just on Lano and that everybody here has failed together. However, that really doesn't help Lanolin very much. But Tangle would continue to explain that it's okay to make mistakes. In fact, everybody makes mistakes. She continues to reassure Lano that they'll get back to Restoration HQ with a great story to tell, and the Diamond Cutters will never give up. To this, Whisper would ask why Tangle insists on calling this group the Diamond Cutters, considering that her team of friends that were lost were also the Diamond Cutters. Upon hearing this mistake that the name had actually hurt Whisper, Tangle would choke up and get pretty teary-eyed. She'd explain that she actually never really thought about the negative thing. She just thought about how close Whisper was with her friends and how competent of a team they were, which was something that Tangle wanted to emulate here. Whisper would reflect on her time joining Restoration HQ, and she'd realize that everybody around her has been really accepting of her, and all have been really willing to help her. As Tangle cried, Lano would reassure Whisper that they could always change the name, but here Whisper would have a change of attitude. She would hold up her hand and explain that her old team were there for one another, and that she has their wisps with her now. She would explain that she's trying to walk away from everyone, but everyone has just been so darn supportive and have continued to come for her. In fact, the only person who seems to not be a team player is herself. Whisper would explain that Mimic is the only person she's ever had an issue with and can't let her fear of the past prevent her from having friends in the present. She would apologize to the group and ask them to be patient with her as she gets better with this. Lano in turn would ask if they could be patient with her being bossy while inexperienced, and of course Whisper has no issue with that. Whisper would then approach the gang, and she would let them all know that they can remain Diamond Cutters. In fact, her friends would probably be honored to see that they had inspired somebody to continue their legacy through them. The two would then be pulled into a group hug by Tangle, and it's pretty cute. With this, Lanolin finally has the nerve to formulate a plan, and while there's nothing tangible that they can do, it also means that nobody can see them, so they can scout out the city and bypass security as they try to find a way out of this cyber realm. Together, in one of the coolest panels IDW has ever brought to us, the Diamond Cutters would be off into the Eggperial City. The group, hidden in cyberspace, would make their way to Eggman, who was cheerfully eating popcorn as he watched Sonic and his friends struggle, and I actually really enjoy that scene. It's kind of goofy, but it's fun too. Now, as the group further investigated, Lano would get a bit frustrated with Tangle's lack of tact, but we wouldn't get more of this interaction as they would spot a video feed of Sonic dealing with shadow androids. These are the same thing that Mimic had used to kill the first Diamond Cutters, and Whisper would just collapse on the floor in despair as she feared that she would once again lose her friends to these monsters. However, Tangle would get her back up, and Tangle would explain that things are not going to repeat themselves and she will not let that happen. She would then hug Whisper before suddenly Shadow would cause a massive explosion across the city, overloading the system. Eggman would manage to return power to his Eggnet Tower, and Lanolin would realize that a bigger surge of power might completely take out Eggman. But suddenly, the three would be pulled back into the tangible world right in front of Eggman. Through the darkness, Eggman would explain that he has an updated version of this portal that will make sure that they can't just come back after a power bump. This would effectively, as he puts it, scatter their atoms around the place. Whisper would attempt to fire on Eggman only to get caught inside of one of these traps, and another trap would center on Tangle. But Lana would headbutt her out of the way and urge her to go find the others to inform them how to take out Eggman before she ultimately gets eaten by this portal. Now, the way Eggman made it sound, these portals should have killed you. I mean, having your atoms spread out all over the place sounds like death to me. However, it really didn't super work that way, and I'll get into that in a second. The whole portal thing is really confusing to me, if I'm totally honest. I feel like I missed something. Tangle would rush for help, and thanks to not being fully tangible, she would manage to escape from Metal Sonic and make it to her friends. The group would once again rush to Eggman's tower, and Tails would manage to hack into Eggman's computer in an attempt to rescue Lano and Whisper. Somehow, through like technobabble, hacking into the computer would end up freeing both Lanolin and Whisper. I don't super get it, but Sonic would be fighting Eggman, and he would end up getting caught in one of these traps. Eggman would then also pin Tangle with a gun to her head, which is like super dark, but Lanolin would appear and explain that she would rather side with Sonic than let Eggman have his way. She and Whisper would then explain that they intend to be a big old problem as Whisper sneaks up and attacks Eggman with her Whispin. Teary-eyed, Tangle would hold hands with Whisper, and Tails would explain that the trap just displaced their bodies, but somehow it was all controlled by Eggman's computer, and by hacking into it, he managed to save them. Like I said, I don't fully get how any of this works or what this is. I really feel like I just missed something here, but I seriously can't find it. Anyways, Sonic, who ended up getting trapped, also would end up reappearing, and he would take out Metal Sonic. Lanolin would then take off her bell, and she would use that to shatter a hole into the wall, and the gang would escape through this hole as Shadow created a massive chaos control, shattering all of the artificial emeralds which are powering Eggman City and decimating it all. Back at Diamond Cutters HQ, the group would then be introduced to Duo the Cat, who would offer to join the Diamond Cutters, and despite some reservations, he would be accepted in. Surely there's nothing suspicious about this character. Oh wait, it's just Mimic. After joining the Diamond Cutters, Duo and the gang would head out with Silver to go practice with the group. Silver would demonstrate some of his telekinetic abilities, but Duo would end up kicking him, and while losing his balance, Silver would accidentally drop a bunch of rocks onto the Diamond Cutters. And to make matters even worse, a giant chopper badnik would end up appearing inside of the flooded canyon. He would end up chomping up Silver, and Silver would really struggle to get out of there. Actually, as he struggled, he would watch Duo just completely abandon him to be devoured by the chopper. And in his final moments, Duo would give Silver a really evil smirk with some black eyes, tipping Silver off that there is something wrong here. Fortunately for Silver, he would manage to escape, and he would blame Duo for everything that happened. However, Lanolin, not really having the full story here, would side with Duo, and she would get mad at Silver for causing this accident. Silver would then head off to go pout alone, and Whisper would go find him. Unlike Lanolin, Whisper believed Silver's story, and so the two decide to go seek out the truth. Now, not that much later, Lanolin would be walking along with Duo, and Whisper and Silver would be watching from the sidelines. Whisper would try to trip up Duo, but Lanolin would catch them, and it would turn out that she's actually been watching them this whole time. Lanolin would be really mad at the two of them for causing this, and during this whole scolding thing, Duo would escape, and he would end up faking getting hit by one of Silver's attacks. This would shatter Silver's credibility, and Silver would be banned from the Diamond Cutters, with Duo staying, well, completely scot-free. A while later, Surge, a former villain who I really enjoy, would want to try the good life, and so she'd be introduced to the Diamond Cutters, and although there was a massive resistance, Duo would be completely on board for this, and Lano, despite not loving the idea, would do what Amy wants, and so Surge and Kit would be invited to join the Diamond Cutters. Following this, the Diamond Cutters would take part inside of the clean sweepstake race as referees to ensure that everything was on the up and up. Now, during this time, they would largely focus on a character known as the Phantom Rider, who was Sonic in disguise after being sabotaged. And throughout the majority of this, Sonic would manage to escape while also helping people. At one point, Tangle and Whisper would have this Phantom cornered, but they would claim that he got away. Duo would start to plant some seeds of doubt into Lano's mind as he tried to make it seem as though they were hiding something from her, which they were because they found out his secret identity, and she would only get more and more angry as she felt she could not trust anyone around her. Eventually, the Phantom would show up again, and Lano would try to attack him, only to be stopped by Tangle, who would explain that she knows the Phantom's secret identity. However, before anyone could act, Kit would pin everyone down, and Surge would go and unmask the Phantom to everyone. With Sonic revealed to the crowd, Charmy would then show up on a giant screen, and he would show that Clean Sweep Inc. is actually a corrupt organization, and everything would fall into disarray, with a giant ship crashing towards the ground. Duo would vanish during this time as he tried to escape, but he would get pulled back in by Kit, and Lano would question him as to where he went, and it's here where he would make another lie about just not trusting Tangle and Whisper. Lano would get really mad at everyone for keeping the Phantom's secret identity from her, considering that they were supposed to be a team, and she would rush off to confront Sonic. Thankfully though, Sonic would convince her to stop for now in order to let Sonic save everybody from the collapsing airship that I had mentioned. To make matters even worse for Lano, as her trust towards her teammates further eroded, Duo would receive a call on a walkie-talkie, and the person calling him would call him Mimic, and so his true identity would be shown, and stupefied Lano would just be there as Mimic fled the scene. However, Lano would snap out of this, and she would then make her way to rush to go help and make sure everybody was getting to safety and aiding to land this crashing ship to minimize damage. She would then make her way towards the other Diamond Cutters, where she would explain that she's made a lot of mistakes and doesn't blame them for not trusting her. She then goes on to explain that she's still learning what she's doing here, and if they don't want to continue working with her, she understands. Tangle would interrupt her, and both she and Whisper would reassure Lano that they are in this together. The gang would go work to save the city as Mimic unfortunately escaped to live another day. With everyone safe, Lano and Jewel would reflect on this and discuss how restoration has always been about the people who make it up. The Diamond Cutters, along with Jewel and Silver, would then meet up inside of an open field, and after some time, Jewel would struggle to explain that she decided to quit as leader of the restoration as she found it just to be way too much and way too overwhelming. In a similar vein, Lano would then go on to apologize for everything she did wrong, and basically more or less explain that this was way too much for her, and she ended up being a liability to the team. She then explains that she wants to leave the Diamond Cutters to go help another town rebuild, but she doesn't really have any experience with this management side of things. So Jewel, in a really interesting moment, offers to go help her, and the Diamond Cutters, at least for now, disband. They have one final group hug, and everyone goes their separate ways, with Lano working with Jewel. With that, we've reached the end of Lanolin for the moment, and I have to say I really liked going through her arc yet again. I really look forward to seeing what she does in the future throughout IDW, and like I mentioned before, I think comparing IDW to Archie is going to lead to some bad times in general. Similarly with Surge, she's very similar to Scourge to a lot of people. However, the characters couldn't be more different on paper, and it's sort of the same way with Lano and Sally here, even though I don't totally understand what the two of them have in common to make people compare them. They are different characters, they're going to be handled differently, and it's important to understand that. Furthermore, people have a lot of issue with the fact that Lanolin isn't perfect. Lanolin, actually like a lot of IDW characters such as Shadow, are flawed characters. They make mistakes, but what's important about a flawed character is that yes, it's okay to make mistakes because that's how we can grow characters and that's how we can show them in really interesting stories where these flawed characters change and shape themselves over time. With one of the best examples that IDW has done being Surge that I mentioned. She's had a massive arc going from a villain to some kind of anti-hero who's really fun, and I think that Lano is being set up to also be something amazing. However, with that, we've reached the end of the video. I would love to hear what you thought about it, and if you enjoyed it, a like, a comment, and a subscribe really go a long way, but at the end of the day, I can't tell you what to do. I just hope that you have a good one.